Can you hear me all okay now, yeah? Brilliant, great stuff. How are we doing? We're enjoying the conference, yeah? Fantastic, brilliant, brilliant. Just as a quick show of hands, how many people here are still students? Huh, great, okay, fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. Just to understand the demographic a little bit more. So, my name is Blair. I work as a technical program manager for GCP in Google over in Dublin, in Ireland. Even though that I graduated 10 years ago, it was 14 years ago that I was actually sitting in those same seats listening to people in industry talk. So it's kind of funny how it flips. It is also, because it's a 10 years on, it's also 10 years since me and my friends have actually met, and three of them are in the audience, which is Hamish, Paul, and Chloe, and I promised I would not embarrass them. So if we can give them a huge round of applause, guys, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's great. Now, I did have a quiz that was set up. Unfortunately, I cannot get access to the internet, so I might have to do this a little bit on the fly, right? So we'll see how we get on. I'm going to ask 3 questions. Brilliant. So question number 1, does anyone know what year Abertay was founded as a university, when it was granted university status? It's pretty close, 1990s, yeah. 2 there, Aaron? Close, yeah. 1992, right in between there. First person to get it. Chloe, congratulations. You have just got a Google Securi-Tay wee stress ball to help you. Yeah, that'll help with the work, won't it? Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, great stuff. All right, second question is probably quite a good one as well. We'll have a security policy at work where it automatically switches off, just in case you're wondering. Fantastic. Great stuff. So the second question is, where was Google's acquisition of YouTube negotiated? The United States. So that's correct. That's correct. I'll give you 4 options. California, right? California, hands up. New York, hands up. A Denny's diner in California. Oh my, wow. Or Clarkey's, the 24-hour bakery in Dundee. Right? There we go, Hamish. Fantastic. That's great stuff. Brilliant, brilliant. Well, and the last question that I have is, how many people are interested in working for one of these big tech firms in the future for the students? Okay, right, okay, great stuff. Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going over some of the... I can't even get the slideshow to start presenting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump beyond the quiz itself. As I said, I started here 14 years ago. And when I started, it was the course of digital forensics, which unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, is no longer there anymore. Is that right? No. There's a module. Our degree is a module. Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate it. I'll just see myself out, shall I? There we go. But at Abertay University, there were a lot of people sending out emails of opportunities that we can get involved in. And one of those opportunities was with the NVT group to volunteer at the Commonwealth Games. Now, most of the time, I sat there in Barrybudden and kind of like east of Dundee, drinking tea and eating digestive biscuits, right? But I was able to put it on my CV. This was me in action during that time. Incredibly focused, as you can imagine, looking at a switch panel, not knowing what to do, but it looks great for LinkedIn. So that's what matters, right? Now, after that, I went on to St Andrews University. It was actually Natalie Cool, who I think is still a part of the department, right? Awesome, she is great, who helped write a reference, and I went to do a master's in St Andrews. It was a phenomenal year. I met some fantastic people, and I absolutely loved it. From there, I actually applied to Google then, but I didn't get the job. Oh, no, I'm joking. But didn't get the job, unfortunately. And the reason being is because I did 4 interviews, and on the last interview hurdle, I tripped up. The first time that I was applying, it was for an IT residency program. What is that? It's a tech support role. Phones, chats, tickets, in-person support. My laptop isn't working. The internet isn't working. all these kind of things. They would come to us. It was the coolest job ever, and I don't think I've ever drank so much Monster Energy in my life, but it was the greatest job. But between that, when I didn't get in the first time, the year in between, must be jumping ahead, I went to work for the BBC. So that was covering anything delivered over IP. News, sports, radio, children's. So it was obviously absolutely fantastic, and I really enjoyed that job. And then after that, I then went over to work at Google in Dublin. I managed to get through the second set of interviews, locked myself away, studied hard, managed to get them. But I did notice when I got to Google that it was really hard to find other Scottish people at the company. I'm obviously not going to be pushing for that diversity by any means, right? But when I got there, a term was coined called the Iron Bruglers. I think that's quite a nice catchy name. Unfortunately, I didn't come up with it. It was an Irish guy that came up with it. A missed opportunity. But that's me in California 2 weeks after graduating with the funny hats that you get with the wee wheels. You do get those, I can confirm. I hear that they go for a good amount on eBay, but I'm just going to keep mine in the meantime. Cool. Okay, so when we got there, especially for Scottish Googlers, I tried my best to find them. And when I did, we approximately have about 80 people today. But during that time, it was obviously small. There was only 5 people on the Dublin campus that were Scottish. But we became the go-to for a lot of different things. And one of the go-tos was Google Doodle Team. They wanted to see if this, for St Andrews, on the top of the Google search bar, was culturally appropriate. I don't see any problem with it. Does anyone else? No? No? Good? Fine. Well, we agreed with that, and again, it got rolled out. So in terms of obviously the things that you can get involved with, even just on a community basis, is massive. Now, when I was there, as I said, I met some fantastic people. There was my class for when I started out, you know, us in San Francisco, which was awesome. And then you even got to meet people who were obviously heads of the specific arms of the company. Unfortunately, Susan passed away towards the tail end of last year. But regardless, it just shows the kind of level of closeness you can get with people, which is great. Now, as I said, before I became a technical program manager for GCP, I worked in tech support. That was ultimately it. But during that tech support, we were the default queue for everything in Google. So things may have got incorrectly or correctly routed to us. These were the 4 greatest things that we saw. The first one was, as you can imagine, in Ireland, there's a bit of a drinking culture, let's just say. And they wanted to extend the Wi-Fi to a nearby pub at Slattery's. The minimum requirement was 700 megabits per second down. Unfortunately, Dublin City Council wouldn't go for it, but an attempt was made, and that's what's important. The next thing was Project New Baby, which I thought was quite interesting. High-ranking software engineer, what they wanted to do was to basically have a successful production rollout in 9 months' time. So with that in mind, they started wanting to get tech support with a tech support team. They also wanted to try and get people from the facilities team to make them food, whatever it was. They assigned it out, and as you can imagine, that baby was very successfully born as a result of this project. I'm obviously exaggerating there. And the third thing was a birthday cake. A Googler came in, their family in the morning, unfortunately forgot about their birthday. Very sad, but their team didn't. They ordered them a birthday cake, raised it with the facilities team, they got a birthday cake a few hours later on. And the last one, which is a personal favourite of mine. There is a lot of engineers in the engineering building, but the best cafe on campus is on the other side. People didn't like the walk because it's windy, it's rainy, it's Ireland. So what they wanted to do was to create a zip line from A to B. So as you can imagine, it went to the physical security team to make sure there was no unauthorized access on the line. It went to the networking team to make sure that they had a 2.4 and 5 gigahertz channels going down so that Googlers could stay productive as they kept on going. So there was all forms of combination. There were some other ones that were, let's just say, a little bit more risky that came to us, but in order of professionalism, I won't go into too much detail there. There was also another great story, which I loved, and that was back in 2012, while the movie The Internship was being filmed. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's about 2 older gentlemen that get internships at Google in California. During that time, one of our software engineers called Lucas was walking into his building. He noticed that there was 2 tailgaters that was coming up behind him. He turns around and says, "Can I please see your badge, sir?" And he said, "No." We're not get after the badge. We're just trying to get in so we can get access to the fridge. He refused them. Another Googler came up because he didn't watch too many movies, and he very quickly realized that it was Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn themselves trying to get access to the Google building. So as you can imagine, Lucas has become somewhat of a legend, which is pretty cool. In terms of my work and what I do, as I said, I started off in the tech support team, but in the last 6 months of a 26-month program, you could apply to other jobs. The difficulty that I had was trying to convince people that a professional switch it off and switch it back on or again was able to manage large-scale programs for Google Cloud. It was incredibly difficult. I had to do a YouTube video, to create a website, to try and basically sales pitch to just convince one hiring manager to give me a shot. And one did, and I got the job. Now, at GCP, I think for the 1% of you in the room that might not know, but obviously big companies, they don't want to build their own data centers and maintain them. They pay GCP, Google Cloud Platform, they pay Microsoft for Azure, or Amazon for AWS. So my job is to figure out which data centers they go into and make sure that they scale so that they don't crash. These are some of those customers. So when there is an expansion pack on Call of Duty, we cover it. When yet another Assassin's Creed is coming, that's why I stepped away from the microphone for Ubisoft, again, we cover it. For Spotify's end of year wrap, that was also covered as well, went out to 600 million people to make sure that that would be a successful launch, and making sure that Snapchat doesn't crash at New Year's. All those things our team gets involved with. No, I do not get free copies of Call of Duty. I do not get copies of Assassin's Creed, or even a free Spotify account, which I would absolutely love. But still, it's amazing some of the companies you can get involved with. And I suppose for the people who are the engineers in the room, this is the sheer volume of requests that we get on a daily basis. It's huge. It's absolutely massive. 9 billion queries per day for the Compute Engine API, just even for one example. We've obviously got engineering offices all around the world. There's a huge multitude of them. I think I've been to 19 roughly myself. There's an internal tool that tracks it. And of course, a lot of great people that work there. Now, I did see a fair few hands go up there for students. When I was sitting in the seats that you're sitting in now, I think some of this information would have been helpful. This is my own subjective opinion based off of reviewing CVs, doing interviews at Google, etc. So, the first thing is, the key takeaway is this link. You can take a picture of it, make sure you capture it. This was written by a former senior vice president of people ops and HR at Google about how to build a solid resume for when you graduate from university, of course, going into a big tech company. That, in my opinion, is something that I subjectively think is very, very solid and very much aligns with what hiring managers are looking for. And then some of the other things. I cannot tell you the amount of CVs that I see that are 3 pages long, 4 pages long. Try and keep it to 1 page if you can. 1 page for 10 years of experience. That's a good rule of thumb. The second thing is put your work experience at the top. I know that you might like to kite surf or, go to the gym and things like that. That's all fantastic. But trying to make sure that recruiters know, a recruiter just wants to know, have they done the job before and can they do the job now? And that's the real important thing. Another thing, if you have a photograph of yourself, take it away. A lot of these big companies are obviously trying to have significant, unbiased policies, so it shouldn't be based off of how you look or anything like that, so take that away. And also, if you're applying for a big company, as I asked before, put in the international dialing code, something incredibly simple, because sometimes your recruiter will not be in the same country that you might be applying for. Another thing, and something that I don't see enough, is metrics, times, dates, percentages, costs. How good are you, essentially, and quantify and prove it. How do we know that Cristiano Ronaldo is the best football player in the world? I know that some of you might contest that. It's obviously Sam Dalby at Dundee United. But still, how would you know that? It's because he scores the most amount of goals, right? So that's how your numbers help to prove that you're able to do what you're saying. And that goes on to the next thing. I've used this in the BBC interviews, the Google interviews, and also candidates who do utilize this themselves. They do tend to get a slightly higher grade from me when interviewing. And that is STAR: situation, task, action, result. We got 5,000 support tickets every single month. And it took 5 minutes for each of those support tickets to put in the root cause taxonomy. What I did was I managed to plug in an AI engine to look at the raw text, take that raw text, and then manage to come up with description notes and select the root cause taxonomy automatically for the engineer that was triaging. As a result, I saved 5 minutes for every 5,000 requests. That's 25,000 minutes and 410, 420, I think it's 416 odd hours per month. So they're saying, wow, this is how it was before. This is your involvement, and this is what you did after. I know you might not have that in your internships. I get that. In university. If you have it in internships or your GitHub repositories, or anything that you might have committed to or done along those lines, make sure you quantify it. That's real key. Some myth busting. You cannot network your way into position at Google. It helps to get a referral, but ultimately it's not a case of just talking. If it was a case that I knew you, even I couldn't interview you, it'd have to be someone else that does that. And the other thing as well is that crazy questions no longer exist. How many golf balls can you fit into a bus? How much would you charge to wash all the windows in Seattle? That doesn't exist anymore. I did get one of my interview questions, which will never get asked again, which was a meteor is about to hit a data center in the Netherlands. Spotify are running in that data center. What would you do? It's obviously just such a crazy. I also think that it was his first interview, so I think that's important to note. But during that time, what they want to hear is follow-up answers, follow-up questions. How long have I got until this meteor hits? Is Spotify the only customer there? How many engineers do I have to help get this over the line? Taking that huge scope and narrowing it down doesn't just help you with interviews at Google, it can help you with interviews everywhere. And I have a silver bullet follow-up question, which was, has this process been documented before? Obviously, every interviewer is going to say no. And then when you give your answer at the end, simply say, you mentioned before that we weren't documenting this. I would document this process, put it in a playbook, and then make sure that other people can use it within the team. It is unbelievably surprising the amount of, I think probably 80 to 90% of questions that you can utilize that for. It's amazing. Fantastic. And I think they are the rest of the things. I tried to rattle through that as much as possible, folks. But I really, really appreciate you taking the time and coming here. And I'm sorry that I couldn't give you the full experience that I was looking for. Thank you so much. Thank you. Awesome. Has anybody got any questions? Yeah.
I just want to ask you about your master's. So you mentioned after you finish Abertay's master's, bachelor's, you did a master's in St. Andrews. What was the master's in?
Software engineering. Yeah. But I realized very quickly that I wasn't good at it. Very quickly. So a lot of people that did the masters in software engineering had already been working in industry for Tesco, Mercedes, etc. So there were 63 people in that program, and I was one of the very few that immediately went from undergrad to masters there. Yeah. But it was a great year. It was a great year. Yeah.
So how was St. Andrews compared to Abertay?
It was okay. It was okay. No, it's obviously very, very, very different. I love both universities. I have to be careful about what I say because I do talks at both these universities. But St. Andrews was a really phenomenal experience. I think I'd grown up in Dundee. I'd never had the opportunity to meet a lot of people from a lot of diverse backgrounds. So that was the first time that I had that. And even though it might be hard to believe, I had my first ever curry when I went across to St. Andrews, and I met a lot of Indian friends. It's like so simple things like that, you know. So It was yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. Awesome. Chicken boona all the way, Paul. Chicken boona all the way. There we go. Awesome. Yeah, at the back. Follow-up questions. I genuinely think that was it. The first time they might say, you have this problem where you have this problem on any given laptop. At the time, I think it was Windows or something like that. And immediately, my first response was to try and solve it. Instead of saying, how long has the issue been happening? Have you ever had this occur before? Maybe we can check a previous ticket to see if it has happened before. And I think taking that huge problem and narrowing it down helped me get over the line the second time. And I think that was the key differentiator. Yeah, awesome.
Does Google have any paths, career paths in cybersecurity they currently offer, or they're looking to expand? Do they have like defensive security, offensive security?
So we obviously have like a lot of security teams that are predominantly software engineers themselves. In terms of like maybe threat detection or intrusion detection, anything like that, that even like my friend Hamish was speaking about before, there is a team in the US that does that. And they work in digital forensics predominantly, but then also compiling reports in order to make sure that it's dished out to the right people to patch them. But we actually had a talk from them on the Dublin campus. They flew in from America, but the 50% of the team used to work for the NSA and the FBI, and then they came to work for Google. So there's obviously a lot of experience that they have there. Another thing as well with your career is that I think when I was a student, you were chasing job titles. But one of the really harsh realities that you find when you come out of university is that the job title doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in your hometown, or that it's going to be in Edinburgh or Glasgow or Manchester or London. Sometimes you have to get on a plane to get there. So that's one thing as well that you need to balance and trade off between finding the perfect job, but also in the perfect location. So that, I know you might not care about it now, right? But, you know, in a few years when you get as old as I am, you know, sitting up there watching Grey's Anatomy, these are things that you think about. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Yeah, at the back. Yes. Yeah, like I have got interview questions in my head. I can't tell you what they are. Perhaps like maybe if you find me in the bar later after a couple of pints of tenants, you might, and I can maybe tell you there. But I think in general the theme is big, massive, ambiguous problem. How do you solve it? And again, the key isn't necessarily getting the solution. The key is trying to take the ambiguous problem and chisel it down as much as possible. And that's the key thing. There is almost an interview technique to, especially at Google, and that exists in probably Facebook and Netflix and like any company, you know. So but yeah, I do have a couple of questions in the bank. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, sorry, yeah, in the middle there. The internship program was incredibly popular pre-COVID. There is still some interns that do get taken on. I used to actually live with the person who led up the EMEA internship program. In terms of what their resourcing or staffing looks like right now, I'm not entirely sure. It's something that obviously we could speak about thereafter and could follow up on. But in terms of the internship program itself, most of the internships that you find tend to be in either Dublin or London, but the vast majority are in the US and California. But they do offer very short-term work arrangements for you to go out to California to work there. I don't know what it looks like nowadays, though. I'm sorry. So, yep.
You mentioned that like a CV should be, I believe you said 1 page long.
Yeah.
Usually, because normally CVs are 2 to 3 pages. The ones that I've seen careers advisors that have really teach you how to do it. I just want to ask, like, why do you advise the length of the CV to be 1 page? And also, does it matter? For example, you said work experience first and like your projects first. But for example, if someone has acquired a bunch of like several certificates, would that help CV when an assessor or an interview looks at it to pass it to the next stage, for example, certifications? How does Google look on certifications?
Got you. So the question is in terms of how long the CV is,
Sorry,
the projects. Yeah, no worries, no CVs. Where to put your projects and also the value of certifications. In terms of the length of the CV, I think it is the opinion that if you cannot summarize yourself in a succinct few sentences, what will an additional 2 or 3 pages of extra couple of hundred words do? I think that's the real thing. So sometimes it's a case that it just needs to be short and punchy. I think Google used to have pre-COVID 3 million applications per year, and we only used to have between 2,000 and 5,000 open headcount. And even operating off that small time, that means there's only, I think it was a 0.05% chance of you getting in. And with that 3 million volume, to be perfectly honest, they just don't have time to read every single page. So that's why having it short and punchy in one succinct, glorious page is the way to go. But in terms of the certifications, if you don't have the work experience, put them at the top. Certifications definitely help because it's an industry standard. Google specifically does not care about certifications. It might certainly help for the occasional hiring manager, but because there's no industry standard practice that is used at Google, every team and organization are different. That's obviously a key factor for saying that this can't be the only thing that you could use. That's it. Cool. Awesome.